Estas son investigaciones especiales de tercermilenio.tv. El 25 de marzo de 1948, en una meseta en el Hart Canyon, muy cerca de la pequeña ciudad del pequeño poblado de Aztec, en Nuevo México, descendió suavemente una nave con 14 cuerpos de seres extraterrestres que habrían muerto, muy posiblemente deshidratados por la acción de un rayo de microondas que habría sido utilizada por un radar experimental. Recuerde usted que nos encontramos muy cerca de la base nuclear de Los Álamos, la única donde se construían bombas atómicas allá en 1948, y por ello era un lugar muy estratégico y se desarrollaron estos radares experimentales. Esta es la historia que encontramos en Aztec. Esta es la historia olvidada de Aztec. Esta es la historia desconocida de un ovni que, si bien no se estrelló, constituye un hecho histórico en la investigación de este fenómeno. Eran los primeros minutos del miércoles 25 de marzo de 1948. El patrullero Manuel Sandoval seguía una extraña luz que se había presentado las 3 últimas noches sobre el pequeño poblado de Cuba, en Nuevo México. La luz, que parecía ser una nave, se movía lentamente sobre Nuevo México. El oficial estaba determinado a descubrir el misterio. Después de varias horas, en un apartado comino en Hart Canyon, cerca de Aztec, Nuevo México, se encontró con un espectáculo inesperado. Amanecía. 20 hombres rodeaban a una extraña nave, metálica, circular. Yacía sobre una meseta cerca de un desfiladero. Estaba sorprendido ante el objeto que habría aterrizado suavemente sobre un claro entre la maleza. Los curiosos eran trabajadores de la industria petrolera que extraía gas en toda la zona. De acuerdo a sus versiones, llegaron hasta el sitio atraídos por un incendio de la vegetación muy cerca del lugar y que podría haber amenazado al equipo que extraía el gas. Todos pensaban que se trataba de un nuevo tipo de avión de la Fuerza Aérea de los Estados Unidos. Era extraño, no tenía alas, ni la forma de los aviones, pero seguramente se trataría de un arma estratégica, secreta. Después de todo, los militares habían sorprendido al mundo al fabricar la primer bomba atómica y el uso de la energía nuclear. Al observar en el interior del objeto metálico, de color plateado, sin brillo, pudieron ver pequeños cuerpos de seres sin vida, al menos 4 de ellos en la cabina principal. Los seres no tenían características humanas. En ese momento se dieron cuenta que las historias de los platillos voladores eran reales, que las historias de naves de otros mundos que se habrían estrellado en San Antonio, Nuevo México, y en Roswell podrían ser reales. En ese momento, todos los que estaban ahí se percataron de que no era normal lo que estaba sucediendo. Más tarde, llegarían los militares. Todos fueron cuestionados, interrogados y amenazados. Las cámaras y las fotografías que se habrían tomado fueron confiscadas. Después de intentarlo durante horas, se encontró un mecanismo para ingresar al interior de la nave. Se localizaron entre 14 y 16 cuerpos sin vida, pequeños de apenas 1 metro de altura. Todos parecían haberse quemado, deshidratado. Vestían un material extraño de apariencia metálica. Años más tarde, algunos de los científicos involucrados filtrarían información. Se escribiría un libro, se daría una conferencia revelando todos los detalles. Aquellos involucrados en liberar la información serían perseguidos y llevados a juicio. La historia sería olvidada por más de 40 años. Se realizaría una nueva investigación, se encontrarían más detalles, hechos que confirmarían el extraordinario caso. Tendrían que pasar más de 60 años hasta que una nueva investigación revelaría los nombres de todos aquellos involucrados. Se obtendrían testimonios directos y finalmente se encontraría la identidad de los científicos que dieron a conocer uno de los incidentes más extraordinarios en la historia humana. Una nave de origen extraterrestre recuperada intacta, con sus tripulantes en su interior. Una historia que finalmente encuentra la luz. Esta es una investigación especial de Tercer Milenio, realizada gracias al apoyo y colaboración de Scott y Susan Ramsey. En los próximos minutos, Aztec, la historia olvidada. Recientemente, el FBI, el Buró de Investigaciones Federal de los Estados Unidos, reveló en su sitio The Vault un documento dirigido a J. Edgar Hoover por parte del agente Guy Hottle, fechado el 22 de marzo de 1950, donde aseveraría que muy posiblemente 3 naves se estrellaron en Nuevo México y que ahí se habrían recuperado incluso cuerpos de seres extraterrestres. Pero lo más interesante es que ahí se apunta ya la posibilidad de que estos radares podrían haber sido responsables de la caída de estos objetos. Y recuerde usted que en 1950 estos radares eran ultra secretos, nadie sabía de ellos. Entonces debemos de considerar esta una fuente de información realmente oficial, realmente importante. Considero que la investigación así lo demuestra. El 7 de abril de 2011, como parte de la política global de desclasificación de documentos relacionados al fenómeno OVNI, el FBI presentó por internet el sitio The Vault. Ahí, uno de los primeros documentos liberados es un memorándum dirigido al director del FBI por el agente Guy Hottle, del 22 de marzo de 1950. El documento señala textualmente: un investigador de la Fuerza Aérea informó que 3 de los llamados platillos voladores han sido recuperados en Nuevo México. Fueron descritos como circulares en forma con el centro elevado, de aproximadamente 15 metros de diámetro. Cada uno estaba ocupado por 3 cuerpos de forma humana, pero solo 1 metro de altura, vestidos en trajes metálicos de una textura muy suave. De acuerdo al informante, las naves fueron encontradas en Nuevo México, debido al hecho de que el gobierno tiene radares de alta potencia en esa zona y se piensa que los radares interfirieron con el mecanismo de las naves. Este documento fue recibido oficialmente en las oficinas del FBI el 23 de marzo de 1950. De acuerdo a investigaciones realizadas por diversos expertos, así como el testimonio de un gran número de personas en los diferentes casos, sabemos que en julio de 1945, en San Antonio, Nuevo México, en julio de 1947, en Roswell, Nuevo México, y en marzo de 1948, en Aztec, Nuevo México, fueron recuperadas naves muy posiblemente de procedencia extraterrestre. Y en el caso de Roswell y Aztec, se recuperaron también cuerpos de seres no humanos. El caso de Roswell es sin duda el más conocido de los ovnis que se estrellaron en Nuevo México en la década de los 40. Más de 600 testigos, un caso que fue publicado por los medios impresos y a través de los noticieros radiofónicos. La noticia se difundió a nivel mundial. La noticia fue desmentida horas después. A pesar de ello, millones de personas en todo el mundo están convencidas de que el accidente fue real. Roswell fue considerado un error por los militares. La noticia presentada por diversos medios, especialmente por el Roswell Daily Record, trascendería el tiempo, un evento que no ha sido olvidado, un error que no se volvería a cometer. Se desarrollarían nuevas estrategias. Los testigos ya no serían amenazados de muerte, sino que serían privilegiados. Favores, propiedades y dinero. Los medios de comunicación no deberían de volverse a involucrar. Aquellos que no mantuvieran el silencio serían desprestigiados y llevados a prisión. Y por sobre todo el ejército había aprendido una gran lección: actuar rápido y en silencio. El 24 de septiembre de 1947, el presidente Harry Truman firmó una orden autorizando la creación del grupo Majestic 12, un grupo conformado por militares y por científicos que investigaría y controlaría la información del fenómeno relacionado a las naves y seres extraterrestres, restringiendo la información alrededor del tema a la Secretaría de Defensa y a la Central de Inteligencia. Era muy claro que un caso como el de Roswell no se volvería a repetir. Solo 8 meses y 22 días después, el grupo Majestic 12 tendría su primer prueba. En el amanecer del 25 de marzo llegó un reporte, muy probablemente de la Policía de Caminos de Aztec en Nuevo México. Una nave desconocida con cuerpos de pequeños seres en su interior había aterrizado en las cercanías de Aztec, en Nuevo México. La investigación original en la que se basa el trabajo de tercermilenio.tv fue desarrollada por Scott y Susan Ramsey para un libro que acaban de publicar que se llama The Incident of Aztec o el incidente de Aztec. En esta investigación ellos pudieron encontrar a los testigos, incluso pudieron hablar con algunos de ellos. Prácticamente todos han muerto ahora. Afortunadamente se rescató una grabación de Doug Nolan, un hombre de más de 80 años que en una plática amistosa que fue grabada hizo estas extraordinarias revelaciones que le presento en exclusiva y por primera ocasión en televisión aquí en Tercer Milenio. Doug Nolan, un hombre que se hizo multimillonario, al igual que todos aquellos que esa mañana del 25 de marzo de 1948 rodeaban la nave. ¿Por qué todos terminarían siendo millonarios? Es una pregunta que se hace Scott Ramsey. ¿Los habrá ayudado el gobierno? ¿Habrán recibido favores especiales? Realmente no lo sabemos. Pero esta es la declaración completa de Doug Nolan sobre lo que pasó esa mañana del 25 de marzo de 1948. Aztec, Nuevo México, se encuentra localizado muy cerca de la planta nuclear de Los Álamos, donde se desarrollaron y construyeron las primeras bombas atómicas en 1945. Aztec se llama así porque en ese lugar fueron encontradas ruinas arqueológicas y sus descubridores pensaron que se trataba de la cultura azteca. Estas son las ruinas de Aztec en Nuevo México, conocidas así debido a que los conquistadores las confundieron y pensaron que se trataba de ruinas aztecas. Sin embargo, eran ruinas de la cultura Anasazi, de las llamadas civilizaciones pueblo, que habitaron aquí en Nuevo México. Muy cerca de este lugar, el 25 de marzo de 1948, una nave descendió suavemente sobre una meseta. En su interior fueron encontrados los cadáveres de 14 seres. Una historia en la que prácticamente todos los testigos han muerto. Curiosamente, todos los que presenciaron directamente a la nave y sus ocupantes se convertirían literalmente en millonarios, hombres respetados en su comunidad, que supieron mantener el silencio. Solo algunos, como Doug Nolan, decidieron hablar antes de morir. Aquí un testimonio grabado en 2003. Doug Nolan tenía 19 años en 1948.
I looked.
There was only 4.
There's just 4. And that's what the book says.
And it had a dome at the bottom?
Well, I don't know. Never paid it. It was buried. It was sitting in the dirt. This up here is where the door come down, though. It opened from right at the top out and just folded down.
So how long were you there before the military got there?
Oh, about 5 hours. 5 or 6. It was burning. That's why we went up there.
What part was burning?
The trees were burning.
La investigación de Scott Ramsey sugiere la posibilidad de que hayan sido los policías quienes informaron al ejército de la caída de este objeto, aunque otros piensan que fueron los vecinos de la zona, que creían que se trataba de un avión que aterrizó de emergencia.
Who actually called the military? Or did you call the sheriff?
Didn't call the military. I don't know who called them. I think that rancher called them.
Yeah.
He called, I don't know whether he called the military or not, but I think he called sheriff's department. Because they come out from Farmington or from Aztec before any of those others ever showed up.
Who came out from Aztec?
Sheriff.
Did he look inside it?
I think he did. I think he did.
And how many drillers were there? There was 8 of you? But
Oh, there's 5 of us in the crew, but there must have been about 20 of us up there before it was over. Because I know El Paso's crew come up there. Can't remember that truck driver's name, but his last name was Reed.
So you were standing around for 5 hours. What'd you talk about?
That damn thing. Trying to figure out what it was, where it come from. What we was trying to do was trying to figure out how to get in it. Because we wanted to see in there, and we knew because the sheriff come out and told us, old Knight did, and said we shouldn't be around there. But that was military, and he said, they don't see no damn military signs on it. About that time, we'd had enough of military anyway. That's what Reed told him. I'm going to cut that son of a bitch open and get in it. We tried. But he was bound and determined to cut a hole in that thing. And I was hoping he would. But I helped him. We was up there trying to cut that window. Because we tried to break it, and it wouldn't break. It just hit that thing in a big ball-peen hammer or one of those 3-pound hammers. Hell, it just bounced right back at you.
Finalmente llegaron los militares, decomisaron las cámaras y tomaron control de la situación. Los testigos fueron hechos prisioneros, como lo recuerda en esta grabación inédita Doug Nolan.
There was about 3 of them, all showed up together.
They were in a Jeep or?
No, they come in a staff car. I guess they came in from Durango. I don't know where they come in from. They come in on the road.
They came down from the north?
I don't know. Which way? We just saw them coming up from a ranch. They just come right on in.
They come up, and you're all standing around. What do?
Told us to get away from that thing. Said, you're not allowed up here. Then they hired some of the roustabouts. They called somebody there with El Paso and asked him if they could hire them, or ordered them that they was going to pay the crew to erect a fence or a barrier. That's what they called it, a barrier, to keep the civilians out. But the first thing they did when some of the reserves got there, they just posted 2 of them down there as guards on the road. They wouldn't let anybody else in. And they wouldn't let us out.
Finalmente, pudieron abrir la nave y encontrar los cuerpos de entre 12 y 16 seres que no parecían humanos. Todos estaban muertos, deshidratados.
When the door come down, let's say this is the door, and it came down and sit down out here, and the window was sitting right over here, in this part. There's a hole in there. And you could see in there, and that if that folded down there, which I know it did, that guy that was sitting in there was sitting right in there. Right, if the door was down, which they wouldn't let us around there, but you could have seen him sitting in there, and the other guy was sitting over here. And then there was 2 on the other side.
So where do you think the other 8 people might have been?
They said there was below, down here.
Down here?
They said there was another floor in there.
Los testigos fueron amenazados de muerte. No podían hablar con nadie de lo que habían visto esa mañana en el Cañón Hurt, cerca de Aztec.
Well, did they brief you before you left and said we don't
Oh,
know?
yeah.
What'd they
Oh,
tell
hell,
you?
yeah. Threatened you with your life. Everything else. And it's just like I told them, there ain't no sense in us talking about the damn thing. Nobody's going to believe it anyway. Well, I wouldn't have. I wasn't going to tell nobody. To hell with them. Let them find out themselves. You couldn't tell nobody they were flying saucers. They didn't believe you. So I just kept my mouth shut.
Una historia olvidada. Solo gracias al trabajo de investigadores como Scott y Susan Ramsey es posible hoy conocer todos los detalles de esta fascinante aventura. Un trabajo de más de 25 años para documentar una de las historias más grandes de todos los tiempos. Pero ¿cómo era Nuevo México en 1948? ¿Cómo era Aztec, este pequeño poblado, hace más de 60 años? Realmente se trataba de un lugar alejado de la mano de Dios. Ahí no había nada. Hoy podemos ver que en ese lugar hay internet, hay teléfonos, hay televisión, hay vías de comunicación. En ese entonces había algunos caminos de tierra. Realmente no era lo que es hoy este pequeño poblado. Entonces fue fácil mantener el secreto. Fue fácil evitar que los Estados Unidos pues no se enteraran. En el caso de Roswell, había ahí una base militar, un campo aéreo, había todo un complejo militar. En Aztec no había absolutamente nada. Y fue entonces más fácil cubrir esta historia y que el mundo la olvidara. Y después desarrollar algunos culpables, algunos chivos expiatorios y entonces evitar que otros se involucraran con ella. Veamos entonces y escuchemos el testimonio de Dale Anderson, el cronista de Aztec, el historiador que nos cuenta cómo era este lugar. Aztec, en Nuevo México, se encuentra localizado entre algunas de las reservas indígenas más importantes de los Estados Unidos. Un lugar alejado donde se desarrolló y explotó la bomba atómica en la década de los 40. Y fue precisamente en Nuevo México donde al menos se estrellaron 3 objetos voladores no identificados que, de acuerdo a los reportes de testigos presenciales, iban tripulados por seres que no eran de este mundo.
In 1948, Aztec was a very isolated community. If you wanted to take a train ride from here to Albuquerque or Santa Fe, you had to go through Colorado. The roads were really just starting to be developed. In the 1940s, there was no paved road between here and Albuquerque. It was a very isolated community. Also in the 1950s, it was starting of a boom town of oil and gas. And the town was developing very fast, and people were coming in from all over the country. And so you had a change in our population in that period, in the 50s.
Then people at this moment cannot understand how it was in here.
Well, it's hard to understand that this part of the United States was very isolated. And people moved out of here during the war, starting in the 1940s, and it was a pretty underpopulated area and a very isolated area. They didn't, the people here were working people, ranching people, cowboys, Native Americans living in the reservations. It was a very isolated part of the world, and of certainly the United States. You have to understand the context of that period. You have to understand the isolation. You have to understand what also the American government was doing during that period. The American government wasn't telling the American people, it wasn't as transparent as it is now. Now we don't know a lot of things, but it was not nearly as transparent. They were afraid. We were in a Cold War in the Western Hemisphere against Europe. And so we were trying to hold everything secret. And so we weren't even telling our own country, let alone people in isolated areas. And that's why they were here.
En Aztec, aún el día de hoy, la mayoría de sus habitantes ignoran qué fue lo que sucedió el 25 de marzo de 1948. Pero la información, gracias al trabajo de Scott y Susan Ramsey, ha empezado a ser conocida. Una historia extraordinaria que ha sido documentada hasta la perfección.
To be honest, I did not believe it. And many people have been into my business and told me stories and showed me photographs over the years. I said, okay, yeah, that's a flying saucer, okay. And so I didn't really believe it. But I also was suspicious. There was too many people talking about it, kind of offhanded. It was not enough really written down after it happened. The newspapers didn't really pick it up. It was almost, one person would say, oh, it's a sham. Another person would say, oh, it really happened. The little green people are here. They're in our community today. After reading Scott's manuscript, now the book's not out, but his manuscript, and talking to people who have lived here a long time, I think there's some things to be considered. I think there may be some validity. I don't know about the whole story. You know about oral history. Sometimes it changes. In 50 years, 60 years, the stories change. But did the incident happen? You know, I think it well could. It's pretty well documented. Now, are all the pieces defined precisely? You know, was it 100 foot wide, or were there little green people inside of it? Were there? I don't know about all of that. But did the incident happen? It could well be. I've changed my mind. We've had a lot of information released about the American government in the last 2 years from the internet. I think people are beginning to understand that all of our governments, the American government, the government in Brazil, the Spanish government, they all have secrets. The Israelis have secrets, and people question whether the governments are always giving us the truth. And I think when books come out that document perhaps as precisely as what Scott and Susan have done, that makes people say, yeah, that could be true. The governments can and probably did withhold some material from us. And maybe that 100-foot flying saucer was there, and maybe there were people in there. That could happen because people are suspicious now because of the information age. They want to know.
Así llegaríamos hasta el sitio donde descendió esta nave en la madrugada del 25 de marzo de 1948. Después de años de búsqueda, Scott Ramsey lo pudo encontrar, precisamente en el Hart Canyon. En este lugar descendió suavemente la nave y ahí la encontraron y se dieron cuenta de que no se trataba de un avión secreto de los Estados Unidos, ya que en su interior había lo que parecían ser seres no humanos, totalmente deshidratados, todos ellos muertos. El caso de Aztec. Vamos entonces al sitio, conozcamos el lugar donde descendió esta nave. Hoy es un parque nacional, por cierto, un poco difícil de que nos dieran el permiso para grabar en este lugar. El 25 de marzo de 1948, alrededor de las 5 de la madrugada, en este lugar descendió un objeto volador no identificado. Más tarde llegarían hasta este sitio trabajadores de la industria petrolera, ya que alrededor de este lugar, de esta meseta, se encontraban diferentes instalaciones, especialmente tanques de almacenamiento de gas, de petróleo y de otros compuestos que podrían ser inflamables. Llegaron aquí para darse cuenta que el incendio, los arbustos que se estaban quemando, no estaban precisamente cerca de los tanques, sino muy cerca de un objeto que habría descendido. Hoy sabemos que no existe relación entre el descenso de este objeto y el fuego, muy posiblemente captado por un relámpago durante la noche, por un rayo que cayó en este lugar. Cuando llegaron aquí los trabajadores pensaron que se trataba de un artefacto del ejército, es decir, de un avión secreto, un avión sin alas, un avión que podía flotar a pesar de ser metálico. Ellos no sabían. Considere usted lo que era Nuevo México en 1948, como aún ocurre el día de hoy, incluso muchas áreas de México, en Chihuahua, en Sonora, lugares alejados donde realmente no existe la presencia humana. We can clearly see here where the UFO was coming from.
Yes, it came from that area down there after it had been in Cuba that night, Cuba, New Mexico. It basically followed the terrain of Highway 44, which is valleys and canyons. It came up through Largo Valley, or Largo Canyon, the Largo Basin. It came across what is now basically Highway 173 or State Route 173. Went over the Archuleta Ranch. Appeared to be in trouble at that point. To quote Valentine Archuleta, it fluttered like a leaf. It bounced off the canyon wall of the mesa and went on a trajectory of northeast. If you take a straight line from here to Valentine Archuleta's ranch, that would bring you to right about here. And then, as the witnesses tell us, it ended up over there.
This is the place?
The epicenter is about right here, give or take. The witnesses I talked to said that it was at an angle and that all the silt was pushed up, kind of like you'd imagine if you took your hand and ran it through sand. And it wasn't covered at all, but right around the one rim it was pretty packed underneath it. But yeah, this is where it laid. Not much grows here anymore.
The object was big.
100 feet roughly, 99.99 feet in diameter.
All of it was here, right in the middle of this clear.
This is where it came to rest, right here.
There were trees then here?
Yes, there were. There were trees here. When it hit and slid, it took all the silt and pushed it away and basically down to bedrock.
How tall it was?
18 feet.
And how wide?
100 feet in diameter across.
It was
around of 314 feet, using pi to 99 or 100 feet.
But it was an oval object, was circular object?
Lenticular, round. Right. It had a dome on top and a smaller dome on the bottom.
What was the color?
A pewter colored, kind of a brushed aluminum pewter. No seams, no rivets, no joints that were visible. Doug Nolan and the other guys told me it looked as though it had been molded out of a mold.
How many occupants?
I get varying reports, 12, 14, 16.
How do we know?
I don't know. I've never really cared that much in the research on it, whether there was one or there was 50 on board. It's the fact our years of research have been trying to determine, did the event happen? And are the sources credible? Are the documents credible? What was the military chasing at that point as far as trying to keep a lid on the story that went on for years after 1948?
What is your conclusion in that sense?
Oh, my conclusion? That the event is real. It did happen, March 25th, 1948. The craft was located approximately 5 o'clock in the morning or a little bit after. The oil field workers all appeared very credible. The other people involved in the peripheral, Ken Farley and his friend that weren't oil field workers, they were actually traveling from Durango to San Diego. He was very credible. He never gave me a moment of pause on his character or his credibility. These men all went on to be very successful. They weren't the village idiot or the town drunk.
They kept the secret?
They kept the secret. They were told to keep a secret. They were young guys. Right after World War II, if you were told to keep a secret, you kept a secret. Might be different today, I don't know. I hope not, but I think it is.
Could be dangerous?
For them to talk? Yeah, could have been very dangerous. This is New Mexico after World War II, and today, all the top secret projects that went on here during World War II, after World War II.
Por cierto, en el Hard Canyon existe ya una placa conmemorando este suceso ocurrido el 25 de marzo de 1948. Fue real, ocurrió, y ahí este monumento. Resulta realmente emocionante llegar al lugar donde hoy sabemos que descendió un objeto volador no identificado, concretamente una nave extraterrestre con al menos 14 ocupantes, muy posiblemente todos ellos muertos, por razones desconocidas. Saber que en este lugar se llevó una operación secreta por parte del ejército de los Estados Unidos. Saber que hasta hoy, pues la gran mayoría de las personas, no solamente que viven aquí en Aztec, sino alrededor del mundo, continúan ignorando este suceso. Es por ello que para Tercer Milenio es un verdadero privilegio llevar a esta historia. Es un privilegio el poder informar como no lo hace ningún otro medio en el mundo. Y seguramente usted querrá venir a este lugar, seguramente usted también querrá estar aquí y convertirse en testigo de la historia. The object was separated in three different sections.
That's correct. Well, 3 separate sections of the actual disc, and the cabin section is reported came out as another individual piece.
There were 4 then?
At least 4 pieces. The outer rim of the craft came in 3 pieces.
And they took it from here.
Mm-hmm. Straight up to the hill to where the concrete slab is. Reportedly then put and cradled on the flatbed trucks that we talked about. The M24 and M25 Dragon Wagon was the nickname. And then taken out through Largo Canyon down to Liebrook. And once they got to Liebrook, they had open road to wherever they were going to go. You could have taken this road back then in through Aztec. It wasn't a good road, and then you would have, whatever you had on the big truck, you would have exposed to the population. This way, there's, to this day, if we go down that way, there is very little population. Just north of, or yeah, northwest of Liebrook, there's a small community. But you're not going to advertise you have this on the back of your truck.
How did you find this place?
Years of research. I got to give Bill Steinman credit. He found it. He was relatively certain this was the location. Some old timers had told us, they kept using the word Largo Canyon. Well, we're kind of at the entrance to what you could call Largo Canyon. Then talking, as we got into it more and more with the witnesses, this was designated the place. This is consistently referred to as the landing site, the recovery site, whatever you want to call it.
Is this a popular site now? Many people come here?
Yeah, it draws its own group of visitors. They have the Alien Bike Run, which, as you can see, the bike tracks right through here. The area is owned by Bureau of Land Management, as you know from getting your permit. It's pretty well protected. We have some rare cactus that grow here throughout the whole mesa. You're not allowed on here with any motorized vehicles, no four-wheelers, motorcycles, dirt bikes, mountain bikes only, or your feet, no horseback riding. They're trying to preserve all the beauty of all this Bureau of Land Management land. And I think there's a good percentage of people that want to keep this area kind of clean and kind of sanitized. This was updated in 2007. The plaque was first put here in 2000. It was put here kind of near the event date. It was put here to recognize when people come out to the crash site that they are at the right spot. And we tell a brief story on it about what happened, to the best of our knowledge.
Y aquí es donde la historia de Aztec se vuelve realmente fascinante. Un grupo de 8 científicos encabezados por John Torrance Tate contactaron a 2 inversionistas de la industria del petróleo y del gas de Nuevo México, Silas Newton y Leo Gebauer. Ellos a su vez contactarían a un periodista, a Frank Scully, quien publicaría un libro, Behind the Flying Saucers, y ahí se daría a conocer esta historia. Sin embargo, Silas Newton y Leo Gebauer fueron llevados a juicio acusados de un fraude no relacionado, un fraude inventado para tratar de desacreditar lo que ellos mismos ya estaban dando a conocer en conferencias como la que dieron en la Universidad de Colorado. De tal manera que la investigación de Scott Ramsey es realmente extraordinaria, ya que encontró el nombre de los 8 científicos que participaban en la base nuclear de Los Álamos y que fueron los encargados de investigar la nave que descendió en Aztec. ¡Qué historia! ¡Vaya historia! Aquí todos los detalles. Silas Newton era un inversionista muy exitoso de la industria del petróleo y gas de los estados de Colorado y Nuevo México en la Unión Americana. Las investigaciones realizadas por Scott Ramsey y los relatos descritos en el libro Behind the Flying Saucers sugieren que un grupo de científicos que trabajaban en la planta nuclear de Los Álamos entró en contacto con Newton y posteriormente con Leo Gebauer para publicar la historia del ovni de Aztec, querían dar a conocer al pueblo de los Estados Unidos el extraordinario hallazgo. Newton puso en contacto a los científicos con el periodista Frank Scully, quien publicó la historia. Sin embargo, Silas Newton cometió un grave error. El 8 de marzo de 1950 ofreció una conferencia en la Universidad de Denver. Ante cientos de estudiantes aseguró que el ejército de los Estados Unidos había recuperado una nave extraterrestre y que la estaba analizando en las instalaciones de Los Álamos. Más tarde, estas revelaciones motivarían una campaña de desprestigio en contra de él, Silas Newton, y Yogi Bauer, con acusaciones falsas, como haber transportado el cheque de un inversionista de un estado de la Unión Americana a otro, y por ello fue acusado de fraude. En el juicio nunca se demostraría su culpabilidad, pero para los medios fue suficiente. Una acusación que nunca fue probada y por la cual no fueron llevados a prisión. Simplemente había que generar dudas sobre dos de los actores más importantes del incidente de Aztec. Acusaron a Newton y a Guy Bauer y así desacreditaron la historia. Para ellos se trataba de una historia inventada, de un fraude orquestado por dos empresarios que tenían una fortuna considerable y que nunca recibieron o pretendieron recibir dinero a cambio. Es difícil de creer que este extraordinario caso haya sido descartado por un hecho tan intrascendente. Aquellos que consideran a esta historia falsa ni siquiera saben por qué estos dos hombres fueron llevados a juicio por el FBI.
Frank Scully was told this story by scientists that allegedly worked on the craft after it was recovered out here in Hart Canyon Road. Throughout his book, Behind the Flying Saucers, that came out September 1950, he completely goes through the whole scenario with the scientists, what they saw, what they experienced, and he leaves you little hints throughout the book on who these scientists were. I've read that book 20 times, and each time I would reread it, I have a copy that I've marked all up with a Sharpie highlighter, and I go back and he'd be talking about a scientist and I'd highlight certain things he said about him. And Suzanne and I have spent hundreds of hours looking at the 8 to 9 scientists that Scully claimed made up the composite of Dr. G. We've compared them to all the scientists that worked on Manhattan Project or OSRD during World War II, where these guys allegedly came from, peeling back layers and layers of the onion, comparing resumes, schooling, what colleges, what universities, what degrees they had, how many PhDs were within the group. And it took us years until we came up with what we figure is a near perfect list of the scientists that we felt talked to Frank Scully back in 1949 for his book in 1950.
Sin duda que haber identificado a los científicos que participaron en la investigación del ovni recuperado en Aztec representa una gran aportación de Scott y Susan Ramsey. Estos científicos son Cecil Howard Green, geofísico de origen inglés, experto en campos electromagnéticos. Desarrolló alta tecnología que fue utilizada en los sistemas de defensa en contra de los submarinos en la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Fue presidente y fundador de Texas Instruments. John Eric Johnson, doctor en ciencias, doctor en ingeniería, doctor en leyes civiles. Recibió 10 títulos honoris causa en su carrera. Fue también mayor de la ciudad de Dallas, Texas, y uno de los inventores del radio de transistores. Eugene McDermott, doctor en ciencias, propietario de 5 patentes que lo hicieron multimillonario e inventor de los equipos electrónicos a prueba de balas que fueron utilizados en la Segunda Guerra Mundial, uno de los mayores expertos en retroingeniería de su época. J. Clarence Karcher, doctor en geofísica, considerado uno de los más importantes hombres en el desarrollo de la industria petrolera en los Estados Unidos, presidente de diversas compañías de petróleo, desarrolló la sismografía de reflejo y fue pionero en la investigación del cable telegráfico transcontinental oceánico. Patrick Haggerty obtuvo 8 doctorados distintos. fue uno de los especialistas que desarrolló el rayo láser y los equipos de visión nocturna. También desarrolló los radares para los aviones, las calculadoras portátiles, así como las impresoras domésticas. Otto Schmidt fue un verdadero experto en electricidad y magnetismo, uno de los mayores expertos en la tecnología de Nikola Tesla. En la guerra desarrolló el sonar y los sistemas de defensa que hundieron a cientos de submarinos de Alemania. Desarrolló el radar aéreo tridimensional. Schmidt muy probablemente estuvo involucrado en la construcción y desarrollo de los superradares que protegían a la planta nuclear de Los Álamos. Richard Tolman, doctor en ingeniería química, experto en termodinámica, en sistemas relativos y cosmología. En 1916, Tolman fue el encargado de demostrar que la energía eléctrica es en realidad electrones fluyendo a través de un conductor metálico. Tuvo grandes aportaciones en los campos de la mecánica clásica y cuántica. Sin duda, un hombre extraordinario. John Torrance Tate, un verdadero genio, quien, de acuerdo a las investigaciones de Scott Ramsey, no solo encabezaba a este grupo de científicos que cambiaron la historia, sino que fue el líder que muy probablemente se acercó al periodista Frank Scully para darle a conocer la recuperación del ovni de Aztec. En 1949, John Tate declaró en repetidas ocasiones que se iba a iniciar una nueva era para la humanidad, donde las carencias terminarían y los seres humanos vivirían una era de oro. En mayo de 1950, John Tate murió de una hemorragia cerebral, poco después de que Silas Newton diera a conocer públicamente la recuperación de una nave extraterrestre. Incluso Frank Scully, quien siempre protegió al Dr. G y a su grupo de científicos, escribió en su libro Behind the Flying Saucers en septiembre de 1950 que el Dr. G ya no se encontraba entre nosotros.
Who is Dr. G?
Dr. G, in our opinion, the main Dr. G was Dr. Jonathan Torrance Tate, who was a fantastic physicist, had gone to school at the University of Berlin in Germany prior to the war breaking out, finished his college at Nebraska, went on to get his doctorate. We go into great detail about him in our book. And then the peripheral scientist that he actually would have worked with during World War II and after. He headed up Division 6 of the OSRD. The head of OSRD was a name that's very familiar to people that study UFOs and flying saucers, Dr. Vannevar Bush. That was the boss. All of a sudden, pieces of the puzzle started to fit. Then we started looking at schedules, travel schedules. Where were these people in 49? Where were they in 48? Where were they traveling? Frank Scully goes into detail where he met some of them in his travels. If he doesn't go into those details in his book, he goes into those details in his private letters and memoirs, which we've spent hundreds of hours pouring through. It's just an amazing puzzle that Scully left. He left a paper trail when it comes to Dr. G that we're able to put together.
Esta es la primera ocasión en que han sido descubiertos los científicos que constituyeron el grupo secreto del Dr. G, hombres muy brillantes que llegarían a ocupar lugares muy importantes en el desarrollo tecnológico de los Estados Unidos de la segunda parte del siglo XX. En 1948, la base nuclear de Los Álamos era muy importante. Solo ahí se construían bombas atómicas. En todo su alrededor se colocaron bases de radar muy poderosos, experimentales, incluso algunos de ellos con rayo de microondas. Fueron estos experimentos lo que hacen suponer, desde luego es difícil de probar, hacen suponer que cayeron al menos 3 naves en Nuevo México entre 1945 y 1948. De tal manera que era importante encontrar el lugar donde habían estado estas bases. Finalmente Scott Ramsey las encontró, al menos sus ruinas, y pudimos en compañía de él ir al lugar. Y ahí encontramos algo inesperado, pero una evidencia muy clara, muy fuerte, que demuestra que esa es la razón por la cual cayeron estas naves en 1945, 47 y 48 en Nuevo México. Vea usted estas imágenes. Scott Ramsey pudo situar los radares que, de acuerdo a la información contenida en el memorándum del FBI, habrían sido los responsables de la caída de los objetos que se estrellaron o descendieron en Nuevo México entre 1945 y 50. Una evidencia que demuestra la posibilidad de que estos radares hayan sido responsables de interferir con el sistema de navegación de las naves presuntamente extraterrestres. La primera de estas bases fue conocida como El Vado y funcionó hasta 1950.
The El Vado Dam, or the entire El Vado Lake, was built prior to Los Alamos being completed. Los Alamos is right over the mountain range over there. They needed electricity at Los Alamos to do all the things they were doing, fusion, fission, splitting atoms, refining the plutonium. So what they did was you can see how this is hand carved, this whole lake. This is a man-made lake, and there's a GE hydroelectric generator just below that building that makes the power. And then the power was transmitted down these lines to Los Alamos. The first Atomic Energy Commission radar base sat right there. We'll look at the concrete pillars here in a minute. That was up through, probably late 1950. The next radar base we're going to go to opened in 1950. This was considered a mobile unit. Now that didn't mean you picked it up and put it in the back of a truck and hauled it away. Mobile meaning it was relatively easy to move. It was small, didn't have near the power that the one that we're going to see next had. So they put it here because they could run the power lines right over to the radar, which only took a relatively small amount compared to Los Alamos. And we can see the power lines going down the river and the canyon here right to Los Alamos. So this was a very important part of the whole design of Los Alamos right here.
La segunda base de radar fue conocida como Tierra Amarilla, una base militar que operaría entre 1950 y 1957. El desarrollo de la nueva tecnología la hizo en poco tiempo obsoleta y fue abandonada. Así permanece desde 1957.
How many people were here?
About 100. They worked 3 shifts. I think it grew to about 200 by the mid-50s and through 1957 when they were announcing that they were closing it and going with the DuLine radar system.
Why did they install these radars after the war?
These were here for one main purpose, and that was to protect Los Alamos, Sandia National Labs, and Kirkland Air Force Base. And if you look at where they are on a map, which we'll do later, El Vado was north, as far north, Moriarty was east, and Continental Divide was west.
They were afraid of what?
Well, we were at the beginning, we were actually well into the Cold War, so we were protecting these bases against espionage, spy planes, or bomber raids by the Soviets.
And these radars were experimental, very powerful, by the way.
Yes, these were brand new. They weren't the military surplus that some people claim. I've done extensive research on this. They had brand new height finder, range finder, locator, and then they had, at where we're standing before, that was the experimental lash-up that was up here for the Navy.
Very powerful?
Very, very powerful, yeah. That was to be used and experimented for the Navy where they could look over the horizon for metallic, anything metallic, a ship, whatever.
Was UFO the purpose of these radars too?
No, I think that was a secondary. This right here where we are now, I could show you on maps, was all restricted airspace because Los Alamos is just straight down there. They did in their quarterly journals report UFOs that they had picked up on the radar, which I found interesting. But those reports did not go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Those reports went right up here to Colorado to the Ent Air Force Base near Colorado Springs. Actually, it's at the other end of Colorado Springs. They had a group up there, AISS, Air Intelligence Service Squadron. And they went under the call letters of the 4602 small d was their group number. That was a very secretive investigative group for the United States Air Force. They're still in existence today, but they don't go under 4602. They were discovered by researcher Donald Kehoe, retired from the United States Marine Corps, at one point where he mentioned their existence. So then they changed their designation to the 1006th, 1006. And I have no idea what it is today. Not much published about them. But that's where the UFO reports from this base would go directly up to AISS.
You said the main purpose was not to track UFOs from here.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, could these radars have affected the UFOs? Could this be the reason of the crashes we had in New Mexico from 1945 to 1948 and probably later?
I've never been able to prove that.
It's possible.
I guess anything's possible. We came looking for radar bases that had been talked about and people made reference to them, and we found this place back on January 8th of 1999. By accident, we're out for a week or 10 days looking for the quote-unquote secret radar bases, and we found this one quite by accident. We had checked all these high points around this area, and actually a waitress told us about where the location was.
How powerful was this radar?
Well, it was powerful enough that even though this was restricted airspace for private aircraft or commercial for that matter, there were manuals written on how to quickly shut the radar down if a private aircraft wandered into this airspace.
What would happen to that airplane?
Probably knock out the electrical system and possibly harm the people in the plane.
And that's exactly what happened to these UFOs, at least what most people believe it happened.
Could be. Could be. It's a good theory, but it's a tough one to prove.
And also we have the memorandums from the FBI where they mention the possibility that these secret radars were responsible to knock these UFOs down.
Right. Yep. That document was released back in, the 70s. And they talk about 3 powerful radar bases. We found 3.
But you're very careful.
I'm very careful. Yeah, we got a lot of years of research in this. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's carefully, or you'll have a noose over your neck by the skeptics and the debunkers.
What is your goal in this?
Oh, there's no goal. I mean, this has been a personal journey of did it happen or didn't it? Remember back in 1987, I made the statement, I'll have this figured out in 6 months. Well, that was probably my biggest mistake in Aztec research.
It took you
We're almost coming up on
25 years.
We're coming up on 25 years. Yeah.
It happened?
Oh, it did. Oh, sure it happened. Yeah.
But this is an amazing discovery. You proved what nobody else could. And we are very thankful because this is just the second time that a camera has
ever been here. Yeah, that's true.
Andy Kirchner, legislador del estado de Nuevo México, fue quien ayudó a Scott Ramsey a encontrar estos lugares, ya que no era fácil. Era necesario recurrir a documentos oficiales. Andy Kirchner quedó absolutamente sorprendido de lo que encontraría. Pero con su información Scott Ramsey pudo localizar los sitios. Y así le presento entonces la entrevista que sostuvimos allá en Phoenix, Arizona, con Andy Kisner. Con el descubrimiento de las bases de radar ultra secretas, Scott Ramsey establecería la posibilidad de que éstas hayan sido responsables de los diferentes accidentes sufridos por las naves extraterrestres en diferentes lugares de Nuevo México. Estos radares experimentales utilizaban tecnología de microondas e incluso tecnología que ponía en peligro a los operadores de los radares y a los aviones civiles y militares. Sin embargo, el descubrimiento de estas bases, de acuerdo a las palabras del mismo Scott Ramsey, no lo hubiese logrado sin la ayuda de Andy Kisner, un funcionario público del estado de Nuevo México, un hombre honesto que se interesó en el testimonio de los vecinos de los lugares donde se afirma que descendieron estas naves.
We found the 3 radar stations, one at Moriarty, one at Continental Divide, and one at Elvado Lake, that up until the point in time when we did the research, they were pretty much unacknowledged as having existed in the period from 1949, 1948 through the early 1960s. And there were other radar stations as well in the area. There were north of Highway 66, State Highway 66 in Arizona, and also north in Durango. But the one that we focused our attention on was Elvado Lake, AFSP-8. And AFSP-8 was developed by a special presidential executive order in 1948 to develop radar facilities around Atomic Energy Commission sites in the United States.
Las investigaciones realizadas por Andy Kisner con documentos oficiales demostrarían el alto nivel de seguridad y secreto de la tecnología que fue empleada en las bases de radar experimentales, bases de radar que protegían las instalaciones de la base nuclear de Los Álamos, el único lugar donde se fabricaban bombas atómicas al final de la década de los 40.
I think what the crashes would be related to is the research and development activity of the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy. What you are looking at is a complex that's unique in New Mexico. It was in 1948, 1947, 1945, and it's unique today. And if you're looking for state-of-the-art weapons systems, that is one of the places in the United States where that testing and that research and development activity occur. So I am a firm believer that flying saucers exist, flying discs exist. But the reason that you have such a high incidence in New Mexico might be that we have more detection capability in that area and than in most places in the United States. We have surveying equipment, we have detecting equipment that is state-of-the-art and was in 1947 to detect air intrusion. And so that would lead you to think that if there was something airborne, that a good place to look for evidence of it would be New Mexico.
You had access to very important information. What did you find?
Well, in terms of the level of information that would be available to a state legislator or governor, or even a congressman or a senator, generally speaking, they don't have access to much information at all on this topic. Since I think I'm not here to justify how they go about releasing information, and I'm not privy to how they go about releasing that kind of information. But I can just say that from my experience as a state legislator, working for different governors in the United States and knowing both U.S. congressmen and U.S. senators, that information is tightly controlled and not generally available to anyone of the aforementioned group.
Le preguntamos entonces a Andy Kirchner, un hombre evidentemente honesto, quien habla en favor y en nombre de los ciudadanos de su estado y de su país, por qué había accedido a darnos esta entrevista.
I wasn't content to let the authorities that be lie to the American people. And I think that any of us, especially you're doing this all the time, I think it's important from an ethics and morality standpoint to say, look, you did see something over there. It actually happened. If you can't explain it, I understand that. But that happened, and you're not crazy or un-American or disloyal because you're reporting it. That actually happened, and somebody needs to take that into account. And I think that if we had more transparency in the issue, there would be a lot less problems between folks like us and folks that work for our various governments.
Hoy sabemos que la mañana del 25 de marzo de 1948 se tomaron fotografías de la nave que descendió en Aztec. Algunas de estas fotografías fueron recuperadas y algunas destruidas por el propio ejército de los Estados Unidos, pero otras, se asegura, se mantuvieron en secreto. Incluso hay algunos que dicen haberlas visto. ¿Dónde están? Algunos documentos del FBI señalan incluso la existencia de estas fotografías. Aquí le presento la continuación de la investigación en busca de las evidencias de Aztec. Hoy sabemos que algunos de los testigos tenían cámaras y pudieron tomar algunas fotografías. Sin embargo, las cámaras con sus rollos fueron confiscados. No se cometieron errores. En esta ocasión el ejército actuó de acuerdo a las normas. Eso demuestra la investigación de Scott Ramsey.
When was the next time you went back after you left and the saucer was there? When was the next time you went back?
Never did go back in there. There wasn't any use. I had a guard up. You're not going to get back in there.
So to this day you haven't been back?
No. What's the use? I saw it when it was there. But they wouldn't let us take any pictures. And the cameras that we had that did have pictures in them, it's confiscated all over.
Existen documentos que demuestran que el FBI, la CIA y el ejército se vieron involucrados en una investigación en torno a fotografías del ovni de Aztec.
The most interesting ones I find are the fact that the FBI, the Air Force OSI, and possibly the CIA had set up a sting operation in downtown Denver to recover pictures of the Aztec crash. Their words, not ours. And that a reporter from the Baltimore Sun-Times had come out and was trying to purchase them for the purpose of publishing them in the Baltimore Sun-Times. That said, I'll let you read the documents and we can pick up what the documents mean. Those documents to me are much more interesting because we have three divisions of our government trying to set up a sting operation at a bar and restaurant in downtown Denver and getting the parties involved that were trying to purchase the pictures, the person involved in selling the pictures, and the fact that the Air Force and the FBI, in their words, say at the end the person selling and buying both claimed that it was a hoax, but we don't believe them. The FBI and Air Force believe that there were pictures.
En el documento desclasificado de la Fuerza Aérea de los Estados Unidos del 30 de septiembre de 1950, se establece que un individuo al que se identifica como Klein del Baltimore Sun quiso comprar en $1,500 fotografías de la nave de Aztec al agente McLaughlin, quien le aseguró que él tenía un rollo de fotografías que había tomado del objeto y que las había ocultado del propio ejército, ya que él había estado en el sitio donde bajó la nave. El 2 de octubre de 1950, Klein fue interrogado en las oficinas del ejército en Denver y ahí negó tener cualquier conocimiento del ovni de Aztec. El personal del ejército consideró que el hombre tenía conocimiento preciso sobre el incidente de Aztec. De acuerdo al análisis, Este hombre, Klein, no daba la impresión de estar mentalmente afectado ni de estar llamando la atención, aunque él aseguró que había bebido alcohol cuando quiso comprar las fotografías. Klein aseguró ser periodista del Baltimore Sun. El reporte está firmado por Wallace Scholes, comandante de distrito.
But in a way, they are recognizing that this really happened, and that's why it's important.
They're not denying that the Aztec UFO incident happened at all. As a matter of fact, they're reacting saying, my God, if there's pictures of it floating around, we need to get the pictures back. We know from several good witnesses that black and white photos were taken of the crash. Frank Scully tells it in his book, and Frank Scully's wife confirms that she held pictures of the UFO crash, landing, whatever we want to call it, that happened out in Hart Canyon Road. She held them in her hand. Another researcher who's now deceased backs that story up.
En otro documento recientemente desclasificado del 16 de octubre de 1950, el ejército da por cerrada la investigación de las fotografías del ovni de Aztec, al no encontrar las evidencias. Sin embargo, las fotografías, de acuerdo al testimonio de algunos, existen. Frank Thayer es un catedrático de la Universidad Estatal de Nuevo México. Es un experto en investigación periodística. Scott Ramsey le pidió a Thayer que corroborara cada uno de los hechos de las afirmaciones que aparecen en la investigación de su libro. Frank Thayer no solamente las confirmó, sino que está absolutamente convencido de que esta es una historia auténtica. Aquí le presento la entrevista con Frank Thayer. El caso de Aztec llegó a la opinión pública gracias a Frank Scully, un periodista investigador que publicó el libro Behind the Flying Saucers en septiembre de 1950. Un éxito instantáneo que vendió más de 50,000 copias en unas cuantas semanas. El público estaba fascinado. Sin embargo, se desarrollaría una campaña de desprestigio en contra de dos de los actores más importantes de la historia, Silas Newton y Yogi Bauer, a quienes se acusaría legalmente por fraudes cometidos. Fraudes que nunca serían probados, pero la opinión pública perdió el interés en el caso, como había sucedido antes con el caso de Roswell. Hoy sabemos que ambos casos son auténticos. Frank Thayer, académico de periodismo de la Universidad Estatal de Nuevo México, lo confirma.
Frank Scully was a journalist. He was an entertainment journalist, and he wrote in a very breezy, entertaining style. But underneath, I began to see that everything in his book that seemed so bizarre had a factual base. And the more I learned about him, the more I felt that we had something. He had almost like a puzzle in his book, and you began to, and I can turn to any page in his book and find something that looked strange when we first looked at it. Turned out he was telling the absolute truth, and he knew. He had talked to these scientists. Silas Newton had introduced him to scientists who had probably pieces of the craft, I don't know. And that Scully, and he, to his dying day, Scully said that this was true. He never backed down from it. And now Scott Ramsey has proved him to be a prophet. Theoretically, you know, in 1950, this book, Scully's book, sold 50,000 copies. That should have ended the secrecy about flying saucers, but it was just beginning. Somebody, we don't know who, some government agency began to do a hatchet job on Frank Scully and his sources until he was branded a hoaxer or a dupe. Either he had hoaxed the story or he had been conned by Silas Newton and his friend Leo Gebauer. And they said there were no such thing as these 9 scientists. And now you read chapter 4 of Scott Ramsey's book, and you can see all the scientists. They all worked under Vannevar Bush in the War Department. They all were working on magnetic anomalies, and they all knew Silas Newton, or most of them did, and they talked to Frank Scully, and they believed the story should come out. They believed the people should get the story. And then they realized that the secrecy oaths they had taken were very serious, and the penalties very severe for revealing it. So as Scully said, in 1949 they would tell their stories for free. By 1950 they wouldn't tell their stories for $20 million. Scully was telling the truth.
Scully decía la verdad, una verdad que vuelve a ser conocida más de 60 años después. La campaña emprendida por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos demostró su efectividad. El caso sería literalmente olvidado.
We want to confirm that this incident really happened, that 100-foot disc landed on Hart Canyon Mesa, and that the military opened it up and took away these bodies. We can prove this happened. We have the witnesses in a courtroom case. If you have two witnesses who do not know each other and they tell the same story, the jury is going to have to say they are telling the truth. And I will say, certainly Scott Ramsey wants to tell the truth. I've never seen him want to change anything or make it better or fill in something with a fictional addition. Everything in the book is documented fact as best he can do it.
Frank Tyer ha realizado su propia investigación y ha corroborado cada uno de los detalles expuestos en la investigación de Scott y Susan Ramsey.
You are putting your reputation on the line here. You know that?
That's right. It's not the first time I've done this, and I'm not afraid of controversial subjects. Unfortunately, in universities, professors become timid because they want tenure, they want promotion, they want security. But essentially, a university should be a search for truth. That's what it should be. And so I'm not afraid of this. The only thing I'd be afraid of is if I were not smart enough to understand fact from fiction. So talking to Scott Ramsey, reading his copy, his text, I began to see that everything was factual. He did not make anything up. He didn't make up even the tiniest little thing. And when he found something that he might have gotten wrong, he went back and corrected it. And I admire that. And so I believe that we are on safe ground. Our reputations are safe. And I do think that the time has come that the flying saucer phenomena, I like that word better than UFO, by the way. It's the old term. I think it's going to be proved to be real. And the only people who deny it are those officials who've tried to keep it secret since 1947. And certainly in 1948 they did the same thing, swearing people to secrecy and with either threats or with telling them it's a national security issue.
Frank Tyer pudo investigar también la identidad de los científicos que Scully identificó como el Dr. G y su grupo.
You found the 9 scientists that were behind all the information that Frank Scully received to write the book.
Yes, I don't know if all of them were behind it, but I know that Frank Scully, and I now believe what he said that there were eight scientists in one place, he said. They all knew Silas Newton. They knew him because Silas Newton wanted to find oil and he wanted to use magnetic anomaly detection devices to find oil, which he did. And these people had created these devices for finding submarines during World War II, and they did. They sank submarines because they were able to find them with something beyond sonar and beyond radar. And so I think that he knew, and it was his opinion, that the public should find out about it. The war was over. We didn't need secrecy anymore. And these scientists met with Frank Scully, yet he was smart enough never to reveal their names. He called them collectively Dr. G. And the main Dr. G, as Scott has found out through, laborious research, he's found out that Dr. G, the main Dr. G, was probably Dr. Tate, who died in 1950. John Torrance Tate.
Susan Ramsey es también investigadora de la historia de Aztec. Ella participó junto a Scott buscando cada uno de los detalles de esta extraordinaria historia. Curiosamente, ella es oriunda de Aztec y era periodista cuando conoció a Scott y por tanto se interesó de manera muy importante, particular en esta historia. Y ella también ha podido corroborar cada uno de los hechos que aquí se han presentado. Investigadora y autora del libro El incidente de Aztec es la periodista Susan Ramsey, quien nació y creció en Aztec, Nuevo México. What has impressed you the most in this investigation?
I'm amazed at the fact that it is this many years ago and that there is so much good information still out there, that Scott's been able to, and both of us have been able to uncover it, and that it's good, solid information, really solid information. It's not innuendos or, well, this is what I think. It's good, solid information, and I'm fascinated by that. I would not have guessed that to be true.
How many documents have you been able to obtain?
I think last count was around 7,000. Once in a while you'll see somebody that'll say something and or they're aware of it. But so many of the people that were actually witnesses were sworn to secrecy. And back in that day, there was a waiver that they would have to sign and to secrecy. And I believe it was 50 years at that time. Now if you sign one of those, it's for life. But so many of the people that were witnesses shared this information after it was 50 years. And that's a long time to be carrying that around inside. Some of them never told their wives or their family members at all. They just, nothing. But some of them, you know, after, on their deathbed or as they were getting older, they felt like they needed to pass this information on. Earlier I mentioned about the fact that the military and the government wanted to not let that information out because it could be damaging or interfere with their mission. And again, I respect that. But I think it's old enough now that they could let that information out and it wouldn't be harmful. And I think it's fair for them to say we couldn't do that at the time because it would be damaging. And I would accept that. I would understand that.
Do you think they will?
I have to think about that. That is a very good question. I honestly don't really think they will. I personally don't. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't honestly think that'll happen. You know, they talk about it and different pieces of it and little bits here and there starts to come out, but I think it's just as scary to let that information out for them as it is for some people to hear it. So if they do it, it will be in very small pieces at a time.
And then I came out here October of '87 hearing about it. I did not know about Frank Scully's book or Bill Steinman's, and I started doing my own research and told my friends and family that I'd have it all figured out in 6 months. And here we are 25 years later, and it's as much as we've learned a lot, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding the Aztec incident, which is the title of our book.
Algunos meses más tarde del incidente de Aztec, un desfile de objetos voladores no identificados sobrevoló la población de Farmington, Nuevo México, muy cerca de Aztec. Incluso este hecho está registrado en el Farmington Daily News. Se dice en sus páginas que la gente salió sorprendida a ver el paso de estos objetos que se movían lentamente sobre la ciudad. A nadie le quedó dudas de que se trataba de un evento muy extraño, muy posiblemente relacionado con el llamado incidente de Aztec. Estarían rindiendo tributo estos seres a sus compañeros caídos en ese lugar. Usted tiene la última palabra. Sin embargo, aquí le ofrezco toda la información. Fue precisamente aquí, en Farmington, Nuevo México, donde el 15, 16 y 17 de marzo aparecieron cientos de objetos. De acuerdo a los reportes del Farmington Daily News, miles de personas vieron a las naves que se transportaron a lo largo de este pueblo, de esta población. Y quizá fue por el accidente que habría ocurrido aquí, tan solo a unos kilómetros de Aztec, donde este objeto fue capturado el 25 de marzo de 1948. Se trató entonces de una advertencia, de un mensaje. El caso es que durante 5 años, desde 1945 y hasta 50, aquí en Nuevo México, muy cerca de la planta nuclear de Los Álamos, se reportaron estos avistamientos. Quizá finalmente trataban de decirnos algo. What happened here in the morning of March 17th, 1950, Scott?
Well, from the northwest direction, hundreds of UFOs came over Farmington, flying right over downtown here, and going in that direction and then banking off to the left, heading toward the east. This sighting lasted for about 41 minutes. The story came to the Daily Times, and it made the headlines the next day in the paper.
According to them, there were hundreds of witnesses.
Yeah, there were hundreds. As a matter of fact, teachers would bring the children out from the school and onto the playground to witness this spectacular flyover.
What did people say then?
They were all silvery discs except for one lead flying saucer that seemed to lead the pack. It was bright red, as though it was glowing bright red from heat.
And why you think this happened?
I don't know. There's been some that speculate that maybe this was close to 2 years to the date of the Aztec incident, and maybe they were coming over and show their comrades support, or maybe it was just another sighting altogether. But it's one that even for UFO researchers that don't look at Aztec with a lot of light still find this one fascinating and very well documented.
Poco antes de finalizar esta investigación, fuimos testigos de un extraño avistamiento. Poco antes de las 6 de la tarde, observamos un objeto muy luminoso sobre Farmington, muy cerca de Aztec. El ovni era extraordinariamente luminoso. Desafortunadamente, no llevábamos cámaras con nosotros. Pensábamos que se quedaría como una duda. Sin embargo, al regresar a México, pudimos obtener imágenes de un testigo que grabó al objeto desde Aztec a la misma hora y día de nuestro avistamiento, y confirmamos la presencia de un objeto triangular. ¿Usted qué opina? Sin duda que el estado de Nuevo México ha sido escenario de eventos extraordinarios. Ahí vivieron y se desarrollaron las culturas más antiguas de los Estados Unidos. Ahí se construyó y desarrolló la primera bomba atómica. Ahí también fue detonada. Ahí se estrellaron al menos 3 naves, muy posiblemente extraterrestres, entre 1945 y 48. De acuerdo al testimonio de personas que recuerdan todos los detalles e incluso de cómo fueron amenazados. Ahí, en Nuevo México, en la década de los 40, se cambió la historia del mundo y de la humanidad. Nada volvería a ser igual. Ahí perdimos la inocencia y entramos en contacto con una realidad extraordinaria. Una realidad que nos demuestra que no estamos solos, que nunca hemos estado solos y que volveremos a encontrarlos. La NASA es sin duda una de las instituciones más prestigiosas, más respetadas y admiradas de todo el mundo. Una organización que no solamente llevó al ser humano hasta la Luna, sino que ha tenido logros excepcionales. Por mencionar algunos, la Estación Espacial Internacional, el telescopio Hubble, las misiones a Saturno, a Júpiter, las misiones de los Voyager, que los han llevado hasta las orillas del sistema solar. Todas las misiones, los robots y las sondas que se encuentran orbitando en Marte y los robots que ahora, como el Curioso, caminan alegremente sobre la superficie de nuestro planeta vecino. Los telescopios extraordinarios que nos han permitido observar a nuestro Sol, al astro rey, como nunca antes en la historia. En verdad que la NASA merece todo el respeto y toda la admiración. Y los que trabajan ahí son personas dedicadas y profesionales. Sin embargo, en ocasiones se les ha acusado de ocultar información, que si hay estructuras en la Luna y estas han sido borradas de las imágenes, que si Neil Armstrong y Buzz Aldrin llegaron a la Luna y tuvieron una experiencia que nunca fue divulgada, que existen innumerables videos donde han aparecido ovnis y estos se han sido negados rutinariamente. En muchas ocasiones la NASA aparentemente nos ha ocultado información, pero nunca había sido descubierta como ahora. Recientemente se tomaron fotografías de Marte, muy especialmente del cráter Gale. En ese cráter bajaría el Curioso, y ahí se descubriría tiempo después que fueron alteradas las imágenes originales, con una técnica que cualquiera en computación conoce llamada copy-paste, copiar y emplastar o empalmar. De tal manera que hoy le vamos a demostrar aquí que la NASA lo ha estado haciendo. Y la pregunta es, ¿cómo se la hace Linda Moulton Howe, la investigadora que hace este trabajo especial para Tercer Milenio? ¿Qué es lo que está tratando de ocultar la NASA? ¿Por qué está alterando estas fotografías? ¿Por qué no nos está dando las imágenes reales de Marte? ¿Hay algo en Marte que están ocultando? Recordemos la imagen de aquella mujer, usted lo recuerda seguramente, captada por el robot Spirit en el cráter Gusev el 9 de noviembre del 2007, que la NASA dijo era una roca y que nunca se tomó la molestia de regresar al lugar para aclararnos a todos. Y en verdad que se trata de una de las evidencias más extraordinarias de todos los tiempos. Sin duda, lo que parece ahí es una forma humana de una mujer vestida. Se puede ver incluso hasta los colores de la mano. ¿Por qué lo ocultaron? Recientemente el Curioso ha descubierto un domo sobre la superficie de Marte, muy cerca de donde pudo amartizar. Pues no se tomaron ninguna molestia para ir a investigar. Y ahí está, y seguirá estando como un verdadero misterio. Por ello, lo que nos presenta aquí Linda Moulton Howe es muy importante. Es una investigación histórica, que seguramente lo será porque nunca antes había sido tan expuesta la Agencia Espacial de los Estados Unidos, la NASA, como ahora. Aquí le presentamos las pruebas, las evidencias, usted decida. Y entonces pregúntese, ¿qué es lo que está ocultando la NASA? Linda Moulton Howe con este reportaje, Copy-Paste en Marte.
I remember how excited I felt on August 5th of 2012 as the big Curiosity rover landed safely on Mars with the idea that it was going to start looking for signs of some kind of possible life on Mars. And we were all waiting for the images, and they started to come. And then on September 19th, I got a very puzzling and disturbing email. It was from a man who was calling himself Sun's Flare, and it was a URL link. And the headline was, "Why is NASA faking images on Mars in Gale Crater?" And that's where Curiosity had landed, was in Gale Crater. So this is what I did. I opened up.
Hello, Sun's Flare here. It is September 19th, 2012. We're taking a look at the Gale Crater composite image by NASA's JPL on the Explore Mars Curiosity program. We will zoom in here, and what I'd like to point out is this. In the previous video, I pointed out this section where it was not visible in a prior image, yet it is here. So this was very intriguing to me, but I may have more explanation of why this is. If you take a look at this image, you've got two rock formations with 1, 2, 3, 4 legs here. Look at this. We've got two rock formations. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 legs here with a squiggly line, and again here, and again here. These are identical. The difference is this segment here. It's not here. This is an image composite, but there's no lines that would really break this out. This has to be copy and paste. And notice this is also a different color hue than this here, or even this. And it is resized. So what's the point in this? Take a look over here. Just for observation's sake, consider this as two eyes, a nose, and part of the mouth. Two eyes and a nose. I say this so I can point this out easily in this dark section here. Let's come over here. We've got two eyes, a nose, part of the mouth. 2 eyes and nose, and a dark section. It's identical. Let's follow this. Zigzag, zigzag. Zigzag, zigzag. Let's copy and paste. And this has to be perpeted, because look how seamless this is. And we'll come over here as well. What do you see here? You see this? It's duplicated. So what does this mean? It means you can take this entire image, throw it in the trash, because we don't know what we're looking at here. This is totally fabricated. I'm upset even looking at this, because I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this is real. I don't know if any of this is real. This is...
Well, I took this, which goes on longer, and I'm showing you that excerpt from what Sun's Flare had analyzed. And I sent these images to a retired Navy captain. And I said, take a look at this and talk to me about what could possibly have been an original older image. Because this is what Sun's Flare is talking about. Here is this odd appendage thing that we're calling sort of like a lake, even though it's not water. Here is the one that has been enlarged and lightened and has this strange panhandle. What would we see if we went to an older high-res picture in Mars in Gale Crater before this? So now I'm going to show you out of my news story that I did on all this at earthfiles.com. The retired U.S. Navy captain that I went to for help found this JPEG from Google Mars, and this was an older photo. This is before Curiosity landed on August 5th in Gale Crater on Mars. Now take a look. Here's the lake, high res. Here is the original, whatever this is. Let's assume that it might be some mineral residue. When you look at this, you're looking at what somebody in NASA JPL used after Curiosity landed on August 5th. This is the source. But why did it end up being misused this way? Look at it. That is not there. This is the before. This is before Curiosity landed. So here is a frame from what Sun's Flare was looking at, which is NASA JPL. This is the URL. This whole Explore Mars Curiosity was made for the public after Curiosity landed in Gale Crater on August 5th, 2012. Why is this from an original high res where there is no pattern at the end of this lake, and now this has been put here? You can see the appendages, but you can't very easily see this extension there. Inside, it's very important to note, in this original high res, you can see 1, 2, 3, let's just call them islands, just for the sake of something that looks like water with islands. But the point is, there is a triangular pattern of 3 objects in this dark area. When you come down to Explore Mars Curiosity, here's NASA's logo. They're responsible for this. They're the ones who distributed this, produced it. Here's the lake. Here's the lake. Now, this strange pattern has been put there, but the third big piece inside of there is missing. Then you look over here. Here are the identical appendages, but they are enlarged slightly and it's lighter. There's only 2 of these, we'll call them islands, that match the 2 over here. And now somebody has taken some sort of photoshopping and they have added that strange rectangular panhandle that was not on the original photo. The orientation is that the appendages are going this way, the 2 islands are this way, but when you look back up to the original high res, some strange orientation has been done in here. These are the 2 islands that have been left, and the large one over here that we're going to take a closer look at in just a minute has been retouched out. It's been taken out. Now, let's take a look at this section. When you go in for a tight close-up, here it is. Here are these 2 little islands, and the 3rd one is retouched out. Here is this odd panhandle. And as Sun's Flare pointed out, this whole area seems to have been brought from someplace else. And the Navy captain that I went to for help sent me an email and said, Linda, if you look at the large gullies and rock features to the immediate left of the so-called Panhandle Lake, the whole area has been pasted in from a different Gale crater section. So now, he did a loop here with arrows showing that this was moved or copied. This is a copy and paste. These rocks and gullies were copied and now they're pasted over to the left of what was the original high-res strange lake-like feature with the 3 little islands in it. So when you come back up here, this was moved to here to make this NASA JPL image after Curiosity landed in Gale Crater. This was not there. This was not there. This is this strange lake thing turned with that panhandle, only 2 islands, and everything from here was moved, copied, and pasted there. Why would NASA JPL do this? What would be the reason that NASA JPL would send Curiosity into Gale Crater on August 5th and then put out the URL for people to be able to explore where Curiosity is and end up with faked images in the crater that we're supposed to be looking for some kind of evidence of life? All right, now let's go down further. Another good colleague who I call Daniel, he wanted to see if he could find the original strips of images of this area. When you are dealing with Mars and NASA and JPL, we've got orbiters on Mars. Some have been there for quite a while. And when they do the original photographs, they are in strips. And then they have people who work in computers and try to put all those strips together, and that's how we see Mars. Well, here, believe it or not, this is the original lake in this strip. But look at what's happened. That's the right. This is the strange one where they had copied and pasted the gullies. That's that area right there. All of this is missing. And Daniel wrote to me, I find it interesting that in Google Earth to Mars, there are 2 high-resolution image strips in the Curiosity landing area, Here's one, here's two, with a big gap in between them. And whatever they are hiding, assuming they are trying to hide something, falls in here. So now, let's take a look. Imagine that we're flying down right to there. Here we are. We're in a close-up on the original high-res of this, what we're calling the lake on the right. And why do we call it the lake on the right? Because when you come back to the original sun's flare image, here is what they're calling the lake on the right and the lake on the left. The lake on the left is closer to this big area, which clearly had none of this in it ever before the Curiosity landing. And we're trying to find out what they have done. Where did they originally get these sources? And we know from this high resolution, this was the original image that has been plopped around. So now, we come back down. Here were the very original images of this area. Here is that strange little lake. Here it is in a tighter close-up, still in the high resolution. This is an enlargement, high resolution. From this side to this side, it is about 1/4 of a mile wide. Now, Daniel said, note that we have been viewing this area with the south on top and the north on the bottom, and this is not a normal way for us to think about images. We are always looking at images from the north to the south. The sun in this, we'll call it upside down image, the sun is coming from the lower right. So Daniel said, what happens if we turn that over, we invert it, and suddenly it looks sort of like a horse, the nose, the mouth, big eye on the horse. This is the one right there. This is what was retouched out of all those other places. But when you get it into this orientation and you take the camera or enlarge it and you go right down to what has been being retouched out, here it is. I did this. And what do you see? There's just thousands of what looks like the ripple patterns that you would find on the bottom of an ancient lake. Now, if this is an ancient lake, and let's assume they know that there's all kinds of signs of water on Mars, so let's say that we're dealing with an ancient lake that left dark mineral in that strange pattern, and that these were 3 high areas that we would call like islands in a lake, but we're looking at dry ground. This is not water, it just kind of looks like water. And when you go from there to there, and you can see all of these ripples, it definitely reinforces that we're looking at something that is like a dried up lake bed. Why would NASA and the Jet Propulsion Lab in the United States, after they successfully landed Curiosity in Gale Crater on August 5th, 2012, end up releasing to the public on the web any images like this? There's that lake. Here's the phony piece that has been put in there, the other phony piece that has been put in there, all that copied and paste of this ground that is not in the original high resolution. And by the end of September of 2012, I and many other people have been looking and finding other, what seems to be copied and pasted in images in Gale Crater, wondering why, and that we have tried to reach people in JPL and NASA to ask them, why is this? And phone calls are not returned, and we can't get answers yet. I am going to keep trying at earthfiles.com to see if I can find somebody who will talk on the record about why would agencies of the United States government responsible for looking for evidence of life on Mars release to the public images that have been copied, pasted, and manipulated over what? What is being hidden? That is what I'm trying to find out, and that is the goal always in Earth Files, to come up with answers to Earth mysteries in headlines that other media are often not covering.
Y la pregunta continúa. ¿Qué es lo que está ocultando la NASA en el cráter Gale? ¿Por qué no nos quieren dejar ver lo que está ahí? ¿Se trata de agua? ¿Se trata de estructuras? ¿Se trata de evidencias? ¿Por qué tenemos que especular cuando la responsabilidad sería de la propia NASA de decirnos de qué se trata? Seguiremos admirando a la Agencia Espacial de los Estados Unidos, sin duda alguna, y seguramente por muchos siglos. Pero ahora tienen el deber de aclarar por qué alteraron estas imágenes. Hasta entonces realmente quedarán libres de toda culpa. Y mientras tanto usted puede seguir especulando qué es lo que está ocultando la NASA.